start. Just one second. Yes. Okay. So our first question is that if you could just tell us a little bit about yourself and what work you have done in the STEM field.
Okay. Yeah. My name is Jayshree Vencatesan. I currently serve as the managing trustee of a research organization called Care Earth, which is based out of Chennai. I'm an ecologist by training. I always had this fondness for pursuing science, but with the kind of a societal approach. That is why I chose to remain in the NGO field rather than get into strict academics, although I occasionally do dabble in academics. I began my education in the state of Andhra Pradesh, from where I finished my class 10, then pursued biology for my intermediate. In those days, plus 2 was referred to as intermediate, and we would do that in colleges. So I did a biology intermediate study, then went on to do a graduation in biological sciences. Then decided that I need to specialize, or I should at least pick up skills of working with the community. So I slightly sort of reoriented my academic pursuit and got into extension education with community nutrition as my specialization. After finishing my master's, which I did fairly well, in fact, I was a gold medalist all through in class 10. I'm not trying to say I'm brilliant. I'm just trying to say that my commitment to science essentially comes from the fact that I've had very good teachers who made sure that I got good marks. So
Yeah.
class 10, I was state topper, and then plus 2, I was once again a state topper. BSc and MSc, I chanced upon getting gold medals. So that gave me a lot of opportunity to pursue what I wanted. But where my career was redefined was actually post my master's education, where I had the opportunity of interning with a good institution in Hyderabad, the National Institute of Nutrition, which then had a project with the National Institute of Rural Development. It was there that I felt exactly what you're feeling today, that there is this big gap between people who are wanting to pursue science and people who actually end up pursuing science. And at that point of time, I had no clue as to why girls were not opting to get into science, but were going into quote unquote softer courses. In fact, I myself was advised many times over to take up something softer, which will make me more eligible to get married. They said ideally a person would like to get married to somebody who pursues a softer academic course, although nobody told me what the softer thing was all about. I also watched in my neighborhood girls who were exceedingly good in subjects such as chemistry and physics, struggling to retain their interest, struggling to pursue a career in it. So all this reoriented me to do some projects, essentially focusing on women and gender studies. You would be surprised that my initial foray into research was through gender studies. My first dissertation was on attitude towards working women. Those days we had this myth of working women and non-working women. Many years later, I now find that that's a big misnomer. Every woman works and works really hard. I'm sure you know that.
Yeah.
Being born to don't know that. Anyway, so from then on, I reoriented myself and pursued. My early career was actually characterized by working a lot on women's issues, women's mobilization, domestic violence, and how women handle it. Various subjects under the overall theme of women. And then I slowly realized that more than women and development or women and science, we need to look at gender and development. So that is how I reoriented myself. At that point of time, I was also a member of the Indian Association for Women's Studies. So that gave me a lot of opportunity to travel the length and breadth of the country, where I looked at this issue in various states, northern states compared to southern states, what are the differences, but more importantly, what drives those differences. All these I looked into. And then for my PhD, I sort of, at that point of time, I was very keen on pursuing a PhD, and it so happened that I won the CSIR fellowship. So I decided that I will mainstream gender as an issue into a science dissertation. It was not met with great enthusiasm by my research supervisor, but somehow I convinced him, and I did a thesis called Gender and Biodiversity Correlates of Food Security. Probably one of the earliest works on gender dimensions of biological diversity. So since then, I've been sort of deliberately keeping myself not saying, not really very explicitly saying that I am interested in women studies, I'm interested in gender studies, but I make sure it's mainstreamed into every project that I execute. So quick, that was a fairly lengthy response to a nice question that you asked. I'm sorry for that.
No, that was perfect actually. So that brings me to my next question. In
Hmm.
this industry that is mostly dominated by men, I mean, from all the STEM related startups, only 3% are women CEOs. So this industry that is dominated by men, why did you choose to join STEM? Was there someone or something that inspired you?
No, even before I thought of it as STEM, I was very keen on doing a course, or I was keen on doing studies that involved a lot of field assessment and field work. I was certainly not looking forward to a career where I would be bound to a desk. So I should confess that at that point of time, I had no idea that there was this discipline called ecology. I
Mm,
only knew that I had to do something that pertains to the field. I need to go to the forest, to the wetlands, and all that. But the person who actually inspired me to do the initial years, I mean, during my master's and immediately post master's, was a person, a very well-known professor called Professor Philomena Rayapareddy. She eventually went on to become the vice chancellor of Padmavati Mahila Vishwavidyalaya. She was
mm,
my faculty. She was not known to be a great teacher by the general student community, although I found her to be the most motivating, most encouraging kind of a person. Primarily because she used to teach at a level which none of us could follow. She was so highly qualified. She was a Princeton PhD and stuff like that. More than anything else, she had a stature that was far beyond what the university had to offer. But people used to just run away when they saw her coming. That was the kind of respect she commanded. She was my inspiration during initial. I wanted to emulate Miss Reddy, Professor Reddy, and I consciously sort of started observing her and looking at what she reads and how she approaches science and what kind of an approach she has and stuff like that. Much later, I had the privilege of working with Professor M.S. Swaminathan, who went on to demonstrate that if women have to pursue science, you need to have policies in the institutions that will help it. Let me give you an example. I mean, as to what motivated me. When I was not very sure as to whether I would be able to enroll in a PhD, by then my daughter was born and she was just 1.5 years old. I was extremely worried. Professor Swaminathan made such an accommodation. He said you could simply go home whenever you want to feed your baby, nurse your baby, and then come back to do your work. All that kind of flexible things are allowed in institutions. So at that point of time, I'm talking about 90s. 90s flexi times, stuff like that was totally unheard of. But this man made sure that all this was offered to me, and he said, you have to pursue your PhD and you do a decent PhD. So he was also somebody who inspired me a lot. The third, of course, my own guide, research guide, Dr. Daniel, who initially began his conversation with me when I went to ask him whether I could enroll as a student. He said, I don't like women. And my response was, I'm looking for a research supervisor who doesn't like women, sir. So please allow me to enroll with you. So from there to a point where, he started accommodating all my pluses and negatives. I think these three people would be the ones I would really say that inspired me professionally. But on a personal front, Mihika, if I may say this, my mother is a highly literate person. In
yeah.
those days, she pursued an MA and then an MPhil as well in music. And my father was somebody who was very keen that I pursue a career in science, and he made sure all the facilities were made available to me. So these two people actually inspired me at home. Have I
Okay.
answered your question?
Yes, definitely. I think Vrinda has joined now. Vrinda is the Chief Program Officer at Steminis, and Vrinda, you'll take it forward.
Yeah, thanks a lot. And I'm really sorry for joining late. There were some technical issues with my Zoom.
No worries
But
whatsoever.
okay. Um, so the next question is, according to you, why should women pursue careers in the STEM field? What is the need for them to join as the STEM industry grows?
See, they have been deprived of the opportunity to pursue science. If you really look at it, I don't see a perceptible difference between men and women in terms of their ability and aptitude to do science. It's sheer lack of opportunities and the kind of deterrence that plague women at homes that's been keeping women away from science. So for that reason alone, women should be pursuing science. They're naturally inclined to do science. And in fact, all the top scientists that you see today, the women scientists, have achieved as much or even more than the men. So There's absolutely no reason why women shouldn't be pursuing science. STEM, rather.
Absolutely. So, STEM is a pretty daunting industry, some would say, and more so for women. So, what are some of the challenges that you faced, and how did you overcome them as a woman in STEM?
So it's made out to be daunting, Vrinda. I wouldn't say it's daunting at all. We are given this impression that it's not meant for us very early on in life. And that is the biggest deterrent that every woman, at least woman in my generation, faced. When you're in class 10 and 11, when you get asked, when you're asked as to what you wish to be, if you by chance say scientist or something, they say, no, 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 this is not for girls. You choose something like teaching, nursing, as if I'm not saying they are lesser in terms of importance. But that's how you are sort of brainwashed very early on into believing that science STEM is daunting. STEM is not daunting provided you have the ability, the commitment, the aptitude, and the perseverance. And these four are the ones that I cherish in my life as well. I had a lot of problems when I was pursuing my PhD. My master's onwards, I had a lot of problems because I deliberately chose to work in wilderness areas and very remote areas. There were a whole lot of problems from people ridiculing me, mocking me, people questioning my ability to do science. All this happened. I simply ignore them. The minute somebody challenges me, I take it this way that person is insecure about the whole thing. If the system challenges me, I also see it that way. If the system is getting threatened by my presence, I use it to my advantage. I know I sound like a mafia don, but that is exactly how I operate. Nobody tries to needle me and get away with it.
Yeah. And that's amazing actually. So our last question is just, what advice do you have for students like us who are aspiring scientists and aspiring STEMists? What would you tell them?
I would begin by saying that you will do exceedingly well because very early on you realize the challenges that women face in this field. So that's an advantage which people like me didn't have. We were blind for a large part of our life. So having this advantage and having a system now which is better off in terms of what used to be, say, 20, 30 years ago, you're naturally poised for great growth. The thing is you have to be prepared to put in long hours of work, have a very perseverant kind of an attitude, and then kind of an attitude where you don't say no to challenges. You need to take them headlong. Once that is done, everything else, because the academic part of it is easily tackled. It's the other part, the psychological part, that requires a lot of courage. So once you have that, you will go great. You will do great, and you will go to great extent in whichever field you choose. I have no doubt about that. In fact, most of my colleagues in the organization that I'm now a part of and that I head are women, and I have a policy of encouraging women to take up STEM. So that's why there are many such institutions, and you'll do well.
Thank you. That's great.
That's very encouraging. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I hope I answered your question.
Yeah, are there any questions that you may have for us? If any.
No, not really. But if any of you wish to visit my organization and see the work we do, you're most welcome. You or
Yeah,
any of your, yeah.
definitely. I actually read a little bit about it and I was very interested. So I'll message you about that as well.
Sure, sure. Anytime, anytime. All the best, but do well.
Thank you.
Both of
Thank
you.
you so much. Thank you for your
Thank you for joining us. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye. Bye. All the best. Bye.
Okay. That
I'm
was
so sorry.
no, oh
I
my
did
God,
not.
don't
I couldn't
worry.
find the link. Oh my
I
God.
don't worry. I feel like I sent it to you. Did I send it? I've sent it to her and I kind of CC'd you in it. So I don't know. Whatever.
Oh, did you send it to me?
I think it went really well. Wait, let me stop.